Hey, this is the Nick Will Talk About Anything podcast. I'm your host, Nick DeFord, and we're here in my recording studio with Rosie Paulsen.
Hello.
Hey, Rosie, glad you're here. Glad to have you join me. And this is exciting. I'm sitting here across the table from you, and the goal is just to have a conversation, kind of be relaxed and comfortable. And
Having a cafecito. You're
cafecito.
having a cafecito
We're getting
with
into that
Rosie.
already. So that you have a podcast that you do, and I was checking that out a little bit. You've talked with a lot of people. How many episodes have you recorded with that?
57,
57,
I believe.
okay. And you go to different locations. That's really interesting. Sometimes you do interview. Well, that's the TV with Rosie.
The TV, yes, yes.
Yeah, so that's fun. You just do little recordings, little sit downs with people like this, but in different locations. And so that was really interesting. I was kind of enjoying some of those, and I caught a few that were in Spanish. So you do both
Yes.
English and Spanish, and I'm like, well, I can understand a little bit, but I'm still learning Spanish. So there's so much that I'm missing.
Yeah.
So much that I'm missing on that. But thanks for joining me in here, and looking forward to kind of getting to know you a little better. I know you from around town and around here in Zephyr Hills where we live, and you're busy. Like I feel like I'm busy sometimes, but you are all over the place. You're a busy person.
That's everybody's perception, I would say. But we'll get into it, and I'll let you know how all this started and things. But
Yeah.
I believe the biggest thing is my passion to serve, and this is a calling for me. And I know we're gonna dive right into it, but my husband Scott and I moved to Pasco County in 2009, and literally I was working for a corporation at that time, Humana Healthcare. I was doing very, very well on a new career that I had no clue anything about. And God says you have to leave your comfortable job and start a new one. And at that time is where I was actually having this struggle with God, because I love mission trips. And before I married my husband, I used to go all over the world doing mission work. And it was usually to Spanish speaking countries. So I will be kind of like the interpreter. And I love that, because I love to take that empowerment and that aha moment of Christ and seeing how God just touched these people, right? And I love that. That's what I kept doing. But when I married my husband, he is not a missionary work. I mean, for him, mission is going to the nicest hotel in town where there's a shower in the bathroom, and he's happy with that. That's his mission work in another country. And I'm like, okay, I can't. So I was having this conversation, and I said, well, God, you put me in a mission field. Why are you not giving me this? And I said, well, you are in a mission field. Yeah. And I said, well, where, Lord? I mean, I don't have... He says, in your backyard. Your mission is in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And that's when I, again, surrender me and my, I know how I do this. I surrendered to God, and I said, then you send me. And I can tell you right now that when he told me to leave my job, I went back and had the question, God, this is 2009. Maybe you up there do not know what's happening right here, but we are in a recession, God.
I like when we tell God like what he needs to know, you know.
We are in a recession, God. You know I'm making good money, and now you're telling me to go and depend on you? What?
Yeah.
And he goes, my economy, Rosie, is not the world's economy, and your company is going to be proof of that.
That's good.
And Nick, my company has never been in the red.
Wow.
Ever.
Wow.
And I can tell you sometimes I'm like going, the numbers don't match. But that is God's glory.
Yeah.
And when you come and you find your purpose and you realize that that is what you were created to be, then you have this bundle of energy that you can never, like my husband is like, can you go to sleep now? Please stop. It's like 3:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that, you were mentioning about the mission field, that made me remember a speaker that I heard. I'm trying to think how I first was acquainted with this guy, but his name is Jossie Chacko, Chacko. And he has a book called Madness, and he might have one other one that I haven't read yet. I'm not sure. But he grew up in South India, later moved to Australia, married a woman from Australia, and then on his goal was to be a millionaire by the time he was 30, I believe. Grew up in a Christian home. South India apparently has a lot of Christianity, and his grandfather was a very wealthy businessman, but also very generous. And so he knew, like, he learned how to make money. His grandfather raised him, and so he learned how to make money. And so that was his Jossie's goal was to be, just a mogul, just be great in business and be a millionaire by the time he was 30. Then he got married and they had their Australian wedding and then they had their wedding in India. And then they decided to take a honeymoon. Apparently, like the whole family goes. They get on this train, they're going all through. They went into northern India where it's like hardly any Christians. And his heart just broke for what he was seeing there. And he didn't even realize, they even speak a different language, and so he's like, so he felt like he was, over his head in this. And they brought this little boy along that they couldn't communicate with, but he was like trying to get tips for carrying their bags and things like that. That's how he's earning money. And they realized he had no family, nothing. So he just came along with them on their honeymoon. He's like, who brings an orphan along on your honeymoon, but like the whole family's there. And so riding this train, and he tells a story, but so that's a little bit of his background. And so he's speaking, and they have a church planting movement in northern India to plant 100,000 churches by 2030, and they're well on their way there. Even through the pandemic, they're on track with that. And so I brought him up to say this. He spoke at this conference that I went to in Orlando. I go about every year for this conference, and Exponential it's called. And he said that one of his opening phrases was, either we are all missionaries or none of us are, because the Bible talks about evangelists, prophets, teachers, pastors, all these things, but there's never a calling or an office of missionary. He says either we are all missionaries or none of us are. And so then he talked about how you can be a missionary wherever God's put you and wherever he's placed you. So when we realize that, when we get a hold of that, I think it changes something, so that's really neat that God did that in you. So you talked about your business. So like, what is your business, encompass now? I mean, I know you still sell, health coverage products, but who do you serve and how do you serve them?
Okay, so first of all, I am a serial entrepreneur. Also did not know that until God really, and I talk about, and we'll talk about in my book later, but one of the things is finding your purpose, right? Those are my book's name is Ñeque. I had this job for about 10 years. I was behind behind the scenes in a call center. But my daughter Tabitha, at that time, she was about 13. She started giving me a lot of problems. And it was actually her prayer that brought me to church.
Okay.
Okay, it goes back to that. This is how how powerful God is. So I was in this job and Tabitha needed me, but this job was giving me such a hard time. And one moment I said, and my boss, you can fire me today and hire somebody tomorrow. My daughter doesn't have that luxury.
Yeah.
She cannot fire her mom and find a new mom.
Right.
So you know what I said? I put this job for way too long first above my children. And now I'm just going to be a mom. Literally, Nick, I walk out the door and I said, oh my God, I was a single mom.
What am I doing? What have I done?
How am I going to feed my children? And God said, I'll take care of you. I'm the father of the orphans and the husbands of the husbandless. And I said, okay, that's it. So for 6 months, Nick, 6 months, I've always worked in my life. For 6 months, I didn't. God literally supported me. Every Friday, I will go to my mailbox. There was a check. People pay me, I don't know.
Stuff.
Nick, the IRS pay me. When the IRS pays you, you realize it's God, okay?
Yeah.
And it was always the exact amount of money that I needed for my bills.
Oh my goodness.
But anyway, so at that time, again, I was doing through all that stuff. And I said to God, God, if you're going to give me a new job, please, Lord, the following things, right? Because they say, you write down and you ask God, please, Lord, let me speak Spanish, because I wasn't speaking Spanish, so I was forgetting my native language.
That's big.
That's huge.
Yeah.
The second one, I said, Lord, let me help people. I just want to help people. And the third was, Lord, let me share your story. Because I was so in love with him. And God, please don't make me a salesperson. Whatever you do, please don't make me a salesperson.
That's like don't ever tell God, what you want, because sometimes he'll be like, okay, so apparently that's your weakness. That's the thing you need to grow on, and you're going to learn. You're going to school.
But you know what? The following day, there were some things and stuff like that, and I started looking for a job, and this thing came out about Humana Healthcare. And what I was making at the other place to what I was doing in Humana Healthcare was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And they were paying me only like 50 cents less than what I was paying. And I was like, can I just take the job? Because the lady was trying to tell me that because I was making 50 cents less. I said, you giving me a job and you giving me health care and for my
Yeah.
children, I'll
Yeah.
take whatever. So I did that for about I would say about a year, less to a year. It was all a call center from the call center. But I used to book these people to go to seminars.
Mm-hmm.
And one day this guy says, you know, Rosie, I have put this, there is the opening for people to go and sell in the communities that you have the seminars. There's one in Pinellas. Why don't we should just show up over there? Because obviously they're not putting an application in. Well, needless to say, we show up over there. We end up going to the office. The guy at that time, which is now the heading the whole Humana market,
Wow.
says, Rosie, you haven't applied for this position. And I had printed the stuff because he's a techie guy.
Yeah.
And I said, no, here's my application. I have applied. And he looks and says, yes, that's my posting, but I've never received your information. Well, down the line, anyway, I get hired. It was the best interview I ever had. When I sat down, they say, if you make this amount of money, Rosie, with your skills, we will have to fire you within 3 months because the reality is you're going to triple your salary.
Yeah.
So anyway, I started then doing this, helping the community. And the first thing they told me, don't go to the Hispanic community because nobody can reach that. Well, guess what I did? The first thing I did is try to go.
Don't tell me I can't.
Yeah, try to go there. But what happened is they went in to sell them something. They didn't understand about education. And that's where my background also comes from, of the grassroots movements, because there's a lot of misconception. But when you do it with a heart of serving, I mean, I've been doing this for 17 years, Nick, but it doesn't seem like it has been 17 years, right? And I help people. I help them find solutions with their Medicare options. And that's how it started. Medicare is so confusing.
Yeah, it is.
And now has become this targeting. If you are 64 years old, my gosh, people are literally coming and knocking on your door, which, by the way, is not legal.
Right.
But they do it.
The scams that people try to pull over on senior citizens is just, I mean, like, it's almost just not quite the same. Like, I got to be careful how I say stuff, but it's almost like child abuse in a way, because just the same way as children can be so innocent and like, you know, just not really aware of the world. It seems like life is almost like a palindrome. It's the same coming and going almost, you know, like, you know, if you get, you know, where your health is declining when you're older, people are taking care of your physical needs. They're making sure you don't hurt yourself. And that's not everyone's journey, but I mean, I'm watching this with my grandmother. She lives in my parents' home, and my mom takes care of her around the clock. My aunt comes a couple days a week and spends the night and helps with that, you know, and, you know, I'm just watching, you know, as my daughter would go over to my parents' house sometimes in the afternoons, or, you know, most of the week in the afternoons. My 5-year-old girl goes over there, but when she was a few years younger, the same things that they were doing to care for her, they're doing for grandma, you know, and it's like, life is the same. And so to think that somebody would come in and just take advantage of people like that, you know, not just because they do need the product, though. They need the product that you have, the services that you have. But to go in there and fool them and pull a scam on them, or just take advantage of them, that's almost the same, you know, almost as bad as you know, harming a child to me.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine that people do that.
Yeah, and see, the funny thing is that's where my prayer came out, because when I usually work into a person's you know, a senior, the first thing conversation comes along is what church you go to. They don't have any filters. Okay, what church you go to. So I always at that time was telling my story. You know, I'm doing this because this is a call. God put me here. Then usually the Hispanic thingy, I did started speaking a lot more Spanish. A lot of the writing that I wasn't doing and stuff like that. So that helped me a lot. And then the other part of it's a sales job. Well, it is a sales job, but at the end, you know, it's like you say, it's a service that people need. And if you go there with the right heart of serving, it's a very profitable business not immediately.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
The other thing that also I believe God sent me into this path and this career was because it was a male dominated career.
Okay.
And it
Yeah.
was and I'm not trying to create division, but it was not only male dominated, but white, older
Yeah, sure.
gentlemen set on their ways.
Yeah.
So here I come.
And men tend to get that way. We think we found the best solution, found the best, like, here's how we do it. And don't come in here and tell me different. And now, if it is male dominated and you come in as a woman, you come in as somebody that has been an immigrant, and now they're like, what do you know? You know, like, how do you know anything?
And there was
And you might be the one that sees so clearly some things that need to change.
Yeah.
Just because you have a different perspective.
Yeah, and this is the thing. They were all these cookie cutter things that they did together. And I'm like, and this is before the branding thing started, before social media, before all that. And I used to say, well, you guys are like, I said, I need to have a little bit of my Rosie's flair in these things, because sometimes people will go to places and they'll see it and you'll have different business cards. All you have is business cards.
Yeah.
So there was all this cookie cutter business cards, and that's my business card. Who do you think they were going to grab?
Sure.
They grabbed my business card.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized that I have something about, once you learn your purpose, you start being authentic and true to yourself, and just putting out that message to people. And people will gravitate to you, especially in your Pay and Thrive. When I understood that, then God opened up another opportunity for a second career, and where I help business owners with their business development. But recently I realized Rosie Paulsen is the umbrella, the Rosie Paulsen Enterprises is the umbrella, and one of my products is Medicare.
Yeah, there you go.
So now I tell people, listen, once you're authentic, once you're true to yourself and you have a calling in the business, now you have to go and be authentic out there, be a servant to your community, and the business will profit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you have that, not for the gain of the money, we all want to make money.
Yeah.
But if you go with the servant heart, which is no different than a missionary's heart,
Right.
God will bless you. And as long as you have integrity and ethics, hey, it will be for. And this is the thing, you will have that resilience and that grit, which is what the name of the book is, Nieke, because you need that for the long run. You will not be done tomorrow, Nick.
Right.
People think that our life, you're going to accomplish something tomorrow. But I tell people, when we're going to accomplish our goal? The day that we are worshiping Jesus and we're no longer in this temporary earth.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So, one of the things you were talking about when you're talking about starting your Medicare business was, just serving others, teaching them. It's almost like, if your main goal is just to help educate someone, whether you make a sale off of it or not, then you've really done the best thing you could do. And God already proved to you that he's going to take care of your financial needs, right? Like for 6 months, he's providing for you. And so I remember, like, years ago, I would ride around in this big green truck doing, I worked for a company, and it was a good company. They did tree work, but they also fertilized lawns and trees and shrubs and things like that. And so I was learning about pesticides and fertilizer and insect control, weed killers, all these things. And so much of it I still remember, like, I forget because I don't need it. It's like you with Spanish, you were forgetting some of it, but then all of a sudden you get in those situations, you're like, it comes back to you, you might have to work at it a little bit to pull it out of the recesses of your mind, but it's still there. And so every now and then I'll get in this conversation with someone, and I'll just start rattling off stuff about plant health, and I'm like, I forgot I knew that. And now I know why all the old timers say, son, I've forgotten more than you'll ever learn about this. Like, oh, okay, that's what they mean. But I'd ride around in this truck, and I'd have like my list on the clipboard of all these stops to go, like 20, 25 stops a day. And in between, I just have talk radio on. So there was a lot of like, kind of like the right-wing conservative talk radio guys. And sometimes I was like, that makes sense. Sometimes I was like, that's kind of dumb. Or like, maybe you need to be a little nicer in how you say that. Like, I get what you're saying, but that sounds so harsh, And sometimes it's like, hey, we need to hear this. But But in the afternoon slot after lunch, Dave Ramsey would come on.
Okay.
And so like I'm listening to him and I'm like, oh man, he's really hitting home. Like this is we're doing all this stuff wrong, early young adults, early in marriage, we're messing up on all
Right.
these fronts. But so I'm listening to him, and over what I hear him say, and this is the thing that stuck with me the most, because some of his stuff I'm like, you know what? I I'm okay making an interest payment now because it'll take me 10 years to save for that, but I don't have the discipline to save, but I do have the discipline to make my payment.
Right, right.
And so a couple times, like, we bought my wife's car used at CarMax, and I was like, Dave Ramsey is telling me no, but you know what? I don't care. We have a baby. I want this car to run. We had like 3 cars break down while she's driving it, and I'm like, they never had a problem before, and I'm like, okay, I'm tired of this. We're getting a used car, and I'm making a payment on it. And we paid it off and never missed a payment. They were never late, and I never felt like it was a burden.
Right.
I've been happy to have that car the whole time. So I'm like, you know what? I can grow up and make my own decisions. I don't just have to take what Dave Ramsey says. But there's one thing that he said that is always true, and that's if you just take whatever job you're in and use that to say, how can I help you? How can I educate you? If you have the heart of a teacher, is what he says, then you know what? Business doesn't matter. Whatever thing whatever profession you have, come at that with the heart of the teacher. And so, like, I mean, I run a landscaping service now, and sometimes I say, why do I even do this? Like, I mean, it's to give people jobs, it's to get in contact with other people, it's things like that. But I'm a pastor, that's my primary thing, and yet here I am running this business, and so many times I'll meet people, I'll go out and look at their stuff, and I might talk about something or educate them, or first is listening to what they want, and then educating them on their options. And so many times I don't even get the sale, because sometimes I'll give them a price and it's pretty high,
Right.
because it costs a lot to run a business, and we're running it legally, and we're trying to pay our people well, and we're not going to do it for free.
Right.
But if nothing else, I feel good because I was able to sit there and educate them on what their needs are. So I think when you approach your life and your business from that vantage point or that perspective, it's like all the puzzle pieces just click together. And I believe God has a hand in that. If you come from a faith perspective, for people that don't, I still think the principle applies.
Right.
I still think that that's a valid life principle, is just give it away, give everything away.
Yeah.
And obviously you can't give Medicare away, but
right. No, well, it's free because the insurance company
well,
pay me, right?
yeah, right,
So that's
right.
that's the other thing that for me. But you're right. Listen, people think that you can only be a missionary if you are in a pulpit.
Yeah.
If you're talking, I mean, like just a pastor can do this.
Right.
We are pastors in our own,
Yeah.
like in our own field.
Your sphere of influence is what I call it, or
Yeah.
your domain, your realm, wherever you live, whoever you have influence around.
And this is the funny thing, because people,
And that's what your business gets you
Right.
into, right? Like,
Yeah.
it gets you into that opportunity to speak to people that you otherwise wouldn't.
Yes. So, in this thing with I was telling you about the well, and I lost my train of thought, but yes, you're
I
right.
tend to do that.
Yeah, and with the age too.
Uh,
But so people think that you just only can be a pastor, and that's how you're gonna help,
Yeah.
and you're gonna and God's gonna talk through you. But see what you're saying. You wear what we call chas, hands and feet of Jesus,
Mhm.
is this they call it, okay? Because God touches other people through you.
Yeah.
And see, that's the thing. You have to be available, because that is God's blessing through you
Yeah.
for that person. And if you go to life doing that, say, what can I do today? Empathy and kindness
Mhm.
have become this thing so much with our current society, right? That is not existent anymore. If it's not about me, like when somebody does something nice to you, don't you think, oh my God, they want something? But
Yeah,
that's your
yeah.
suspicion, right?
Well, we're kind of like, the world has trained us to feel that way, right?
Right.
To think that way, but it's still not always correct.
Right. And my choice, when I realized how and this come from my upbringing, being suspicious of everything,
Yeah.
how I can make that choice of being happy
Yeah.
where I am,
Yeah.
where it's expected, and not expectations in my part, but knowing that people's heart are in the right place.
Mhm.
Because if Jesus died for these people, who I am to
Yeah,
judge
that's
him,
good.
right?
That's good.
And people make decisions right in the moment with the information they have.
Yeah.
Okay, so we see of those people just through God's eyes, which
Mhm.
I have always asked Him to do. My life has become a lot better now. I'm not telling you people don't get under my skin sometimes. Like yesterday, I had this lady that she really got under my skin, and my little old non-Christian self is like, um, but if you go in understanding that you're there for a purpose, God is gonna use you to touch that person. Your life is gonna be a lot, a lot easier, a lot better. Um, but back to what I was telling you about the business too. In 2010, when I came to Pasco
Mhm.
County, where I started my entrepreneurial business, right? Because God says, okay, leave everything you got. This $100,000 a year job that Judge still make, and let's do your business. I started and founded this Pasco Hernando Hispanic Chamber of
Yeah.
Commerce in this area because I
Now,
felt
for people that aren't from this area, like Pasco Hernando, this is like north of Tampa.
right,
The two counties that are most,
right.
north and norther from that.
So Tampa Bay area has Pinellas, Pasco, Hernando, Hillsboro, and Polk. Some of the Polk
Yeah.
stuff. Some people go a little bit of Manatee, but that's actually kind of like the Tampa Bay area.
Yeah.
In Hillsboro, everything is very so it's the city, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows Tampa.
That's like
Tampa
the
is the third last,
downtown, all
yeah,
that stuff.
third largest city now in Florida. But Pasco and Hernando was just starting. This is 2010. And I said, when I met, the first thing I did here was going to the chambers because that's how
Yeah.
you do here. You
Yeah.
own a business, you go to the chamber.
Right.
And at that time, there were 6 chambers
Okay.
in the Pasco area. So I liked the whole the idea about the chamber and blah, blah, blah. So I will go to Hillsboro because I learned from the chambers here that
Mhm.
there was a Hispanic chamber in Hillsboro.
Okay.
So I went to visit over there, and all the Hispanics from Pasco were in the chamber down
Because
there.
there
And
wasn't
I'm
one
like,
here, and they're having to
right,
drive down. Yeah.
and I kept saying to them, why are you guys down here? And it's not like the Hispanic chambers speak English or anything. No, we
Yeah.
all do the business in English and have the whole, but
Right.
some of us have an accent.
Yeah.
Some of them will end up speaking Spanish at the end of the
Sure.
presentation, whatever. So I would say to them, why are you guys driving all the way over here
Yeah.
when we in Pasco?
Right.
And he goes, because we don't have a chamber over there. So I made a thing to.
And how crazy is that? Because it's like you guys are entrepreneurs. Somebody start one, right? Like
Yeah,
how
and
complicated. But I think that goes back to maybe, what you're talking about your motivation for
Mhm.
why are you in business? Is it to help and serve others, or is it just for whatever benefits you think you receive personally or for your family?
yeah,
And
and I think that part of
so
this.
so when you start that, it's like, hey, we need this, and I will serve you guys by getting it going. It's going to take help. You can't do it on your own.
Well, and yeah, and you, if you know Rosie, I do. But I didn't have the institutional knowledge, but I
Yeah.
started arguing. I started asking, and I'm telling you, God opened the door, and I founded the chamber, and the first thing came out was hate mail. So I realized that when you do hate
Oh
mail,
my goodness.
it's because you're touching a nerve of something that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And the chamber
What kind of
became
people are sending hate mail for starting a Hispanic chamber?
somebody, the
Like people
first
that don't like
article.
immigrants or what?
No, it was somebody. It was not about. I didn't see it as a negative for me per
Yeah.
se, but the article read 6 chambers in the Pasco area
Oh.
now at a 7th
So
one.
they saw it as competition.
Yes, and I did not know that back then because again, the whole thing is in less than 2 years we end up with about 450 members. I mean, all
Wow.
my grit and resilient. And when
That's
I
about the size
handed,
of like the Zephyr Hills Chamber of Commerce that we live in.
yeah, and this was the whole county in
Yeah.
Hernando. And what I did is I handed down my baby to other people who couldn't do my job
Yeah.
because in their idea what's in it for me did not work.
Ah.
So eventually the chamber merged. But the reason why I talk about this is because that's when I became involved with politics.
Okay.
And politics, and I'm not saying, I say government because people
Yeah.
don't like the word politics.
Right.
But, okay. But it's government. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of these elected officials were coming to the chamber, which I did not know that was actually how they do things here.
Yeah.
So I will get Paula O'Neill to show up at my
Yeah.
place, at Mike Wells Sr., and I did not know who they were.
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
yeah, like,
You're like,
Well,
okay,
these
so you're Mike
people.
Wells. Like, oh, you're a county commissioner. You know,
Yeah,
like
I
you're
had
you're running some
no.
of the big decisions that happen. You know, about how roads get done, how
Yeah,
buildings get built, how the infrastructure
no
happens.
clue. Institutional knowledge.
Yeah,
And a lot of these other Hispanics, we didn't know who these people were.
I tell you
Who's
what,
this woman?
I am largely ignorant of politics and government, and I've learned a lot the same way. You
Mm-hmm.
know, just going to Chamber of Commerce breakfast once a month at Golden Corral, 7 a.m. first Thursday of the
Yeah.
month. It's early, but it's worth going to.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you start saying, "Well, I see your name on the signs for an election season. I voted for you or voted against you or whatever. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter." And like, oh, this is how local government runs.
Politics. Well,
And politics gets involved, and you're right, it's kind of a dirty word almost, and it's like, can't we just have government without politics? Well,
right.
apparently not,
Right. But
but
it has become politicized
yeah,
now. But one of the things I realized, and that's what I say business and the American dream, and when I'm wearing this beautiful blue in my flags today, because it is my American dream, is again, um, laws are being passed that affect your business directly
yes,
or indirectly. So if
yes,
you're not involving local
right,
politics and local government, that should be another part of your business, like it is your accounting,
yeah,
like it
that
is
makes
your
sense,
insurance, like it is your legality of the business.
yeah,
Politics needs to get involved because again, these people are making these decisions, and from the candidates or from the elected officials point of view, sometimes they get landed these
mm,
laws they have no clue about.
yeah,
They rely on their constituents for feedback
yeah.
and nobody shows up. So these people go
So
with
they
the
have a forum
yes,
saying like, we need your input. I don't know everything. Which,
exactly.
isn't it insane to think that we have these presidential elections where we're like, what's your stance on this or this or this? It's like, how do you expect them to actually have a stance? All that they're telling you what their people surrounding them
Mm-hmm,
told them to
mm-hmm.
say on some of those things.
Right, right.
I'm not trying to be jaded and say that they don't know anything, but the idea that we should expect one person to be an expert on everything and to have an opinion on everything. My wife says I'm opinionated, and she's right, and I counter back and I say we all are opinionated.
Right.
Just some of us don't know when to shut our mouth
Yeah.
about it, and I tend to be that way. So I share my opinions, but so many times it's like, they might have an opinion, but is it an expert opinion? Is it an informed opinion? Granted, more information than what I have, but I like what you're saying. They have these forums so that we can
Mm-hmm.
kind of help guide them, because we elected them and put them in office, or maybe we voted against them, but we still
Right.
have a vested interest, and they
Right.
are still our representatives. So
Right.
that's a good
Well,
motivation to get involved in government.
and these people, and this is don't understand the American dream and our founding fathers and why this nation, which is only what 400
Yeah,
years old,
yeah,
is the
we're
most
still a baby.
powerful. Right, we
Yeah,
are the most powerful nation in the world. Why? Again, because of our Judeo-Christian values,
yeah,
and where we have gotten into trouble right now, and that will be another political thingy, but it's because we have not put God first.
yeah.
Okay, we
I'll
have
agree.
walked away from God.
Yeah,
So now we're getting missionaries from other countries
that's right.
coming to
That's right.
mission here
They're
in
saying
our
those Americans need Jesus. And
exactly.
they're like, they're the ones that send missionaries, right? Not anymore. And I'm sorry, I laughed a second ago when you said, that we're the most powerful nation. I'm not laughing about that, but I listened to a lot of stand-up comedy, and so it was like, I was just thinking, what would a comedian do with that statement? They'd be like, "Hey, you know what? Let's find a toddler and give them the authority to run the house or something like that. It would be mass chaos, So that's a big responsibility we have. We're in the scheme of the world, You think of a lot of really ancient countries that have been around for hundreds more years or thousands more years than us in some form or another. And it's like they have some more experience with that. And it's like, that doesn't mean everything. Just like when you stepped into the Medicare world and you found all these, you didn't say it, but I'll say it, old white guys, OWGs. And you're like, come on, guys, like, can we change just a little bit, And so we have some perspective, I'm sure, as that. But what a responsibility to say, okay, we can step in
Mm-hmm.
and tell everybody, here's the rules, now play by
Mm-hmm.
them. And there's times where we've done that, I think, and gotten it wrong. And that's where I'm stepping outside of my expertise and knowledge. So I'm not going to get into that. But it's like, what a responsibility we have as America, because we can do something. But the question is, should we always do something? So,
But the reason why I was talking about this too, and yes, is because the government started, and again, this is where the perfectionist of the perfect plan of our founding fathers is that each of our elected officials represent us.
yes, yes.
They work for us.
And they forget that, don't they?
Yeah, they forget that really,
Yeah.
and but it is our responsibility. And what has happened is through the years, people have says, well, they're politicians, they're career politicians, they know what they're doing. You know, I'm just gonna work on my Medicare business and let them do their stuff. But then you realize your Medicare business, which is Congress, which I did not know that. Congress is affecting if I'm not in touch with my congressman,
Right.
and I sell Medicare options,
Yeah.
and now Congress is considering
change
to
it.
get away from Medicaid Advantage, which is 90% of my business
Yeah.
or 85% of that business. I will lose all that money
Yeah.
because I wasn't there to tell him, hello, there's a whole
but
lot of people.
more than just your business, though, that's like got to affect people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, that business, what it's doing for your clients, your people you serve. And if those politicians are saying, well, the argument, somebody gave me this paper, this argument, this position, and they said this is what would happen, these are the good things that would happen if we canceled
Right.
this, and that sounds good, so I'm going to vote that way, unless somebody that knows more than me about it, or in some ways
Right.
knows more, can share their perspective and say, hey, wait a minute, you realize what goes away if you do that. You
Yeah, and
realize,
that's the advocacy. You don't
Yeah.
always have to have a title or position or something, which is the other thing where I also like to get involved on those citizen boards where you
Yeah.
don't get elected, you get appointed because you
Yeah.
want to be a
Yeah.
voice. You want to
Right.
be a voice. These people do not know everything. I'm sorry. They
Yeah.
might want to sound like they know everything. The other part is that we all always think about the presidential election. Do you know, President, what can he really do locally?
Yeah. Oh,
I
for
mean,
sure.
Even in a school board,
Yeah.
our local school board, which is terrible, and again, that's my personal opinion, things are coming from national that should not
Yeah.
be, and it's affecting our future generations.
And the national level, in my opinion, shouldn't affect the state, and definitely not the county level when it comes to school and things like that. I mean, the problem is we accept funds from them, right? And so they think they can tell us how to use it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, was the answer not accept those government,
Well, and this,
I mean,
and that's
I'm
what I
fine with
think.
that. We'll figure out another way.
Yeah, and this is where I think the parents are really starting from the grassroots
Yeah.
level, which is the school board. And if you
Sure.
have children, I want to encourage you,
Yeah.
go into your school boards because your children are being taught things without you knowing
right.
or having
right.
to have a signature. How can your children belong to us? They don't belong to the
Yeah,
government.
they don't belong to government.
You cannot, they're indoctrinating our children to hate the place we live in.
Right.
And they all think that they're going to live in China, Japan, or all this stuff, or Amsterdam. Do you know Amsterdam is the size of Florida?
Yeah.
You can take
can't
the
put
whole
everyone there.
United States and live in Amsterdam, which, by the way, it is a capitalist society compared to what people say that
Oh,
is
man.
socialist, like
Yeah.
are other people. But anyway, so back to politics. That's why it's good to get involved. That's why the patriotism needs to be taught in our school, and civics need to be taught
Yeah,
in a school.
I agree.
Because as a naturalized citizen, my biggest hurdle, I will say here, was the institutional knowledge, not only in business and government, in many things of how culturally adapt to do business correctly in the United States and live in
Yeah.
a culture. To me, I became so successful because I culturally acclimated. When I understood what an American was, I became an American. That was my goal. And when I lived in America, I was an American. I did not. I love my country, my native country, but I was an American. And I love what my country stands for. But people have forgotten that.
Yeah.
I had to go teach that to not to born citizens.
Here,
It American is a set of values: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, justice. All those things is morals that comes from our Judeo-Christian values and our founding fathers to the perfect nation. That yes, we are a baby nation, but look how successful we are.
And those founding fathers, you brought them up a couple times. You know, these were not ignoramuses. They were not dumb men. And just because they lived in a different time and a lot of the technology and the advances of civilization that we've had since then doesn't mean that they weren't big thinkers on not just their times but the future as well. I mean, they were trying to set up something that would persist into the future in a way that the world had never seen before. I mean, the kind of country and government that we have, no one else has.
Yes.
No one else has ever had. You know, they were creating a new thing, and sure, they took a few bits and pieces from different systems, but it was a new idea, you know, and they even knew that it would be a struggle to keep it. You know, what was it? What kind of government do we have? Or like a republic if you can keep it.
Right.
You know, like they knew that was up to us to maintain the defense of that status, because it would tend to go more towards democracy, which we have a democratic process, but we are not a democracy.
Right, we are not, and people don't understand
and they don't understand that. And I still, like, I'm still fuzzy on parts of it, but it's like it's always going to be a struggle to maintain the kind of country we were supposed to be, because it's always going to shift towards, you brought up the career politicians, and I think that they stay that way because every system tries to maintain its own life, right? Like it's always just like we struggle to survive. You know, you can't like hold your own head underwater long enough. Like your body will like say, no, I'm not letting you do that. It'll take over. You know, your body fights even against your own will sometimes to survive. And every organization, every organism does that. And I think politicians aren't immune, because they say, well, I got in office, but in order to stay in office, I have to do these things. And in order to do these things, I have to listen to these people who are paying the bills for my campaigns. And then that means that the constituents that might not agree with that, they've got to be told they're wrong. And so that's when they try to exert control, when you talk about the school boards and things like that. So it's like, oh my goodness, you know, how did we get here?
Right. But, and you know, this is the beauty about this whole thing, right? We can make a difference.
Yeah.
Okay. We have not been perfect as a nation, but we have learned so much and we have come a long way. So when people says America is not the greatest, it was never great. No, America has always been great, and it will always continue to be great, because why? We learn from our mistakes and we make it better. And it's as a person, that's how you grow. They call it the enlightenment, right? Yeah. So, you know, at 25 years old, I care about what people think about me. Now at 52, if you like me, fine. Yeah. And if you don't, you will be in the I don't like Rosie season. And people are in those seasons once in a while. But you know what is the funniest thing is they always get out of that season and, I love Rosie. But when I hold them accountable, what happens is that people, when they face their truth and you make that change, which is where grace comes from, where the understanding of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ for us, right? Is understanding you were a sinner, and because of what you do, even if it's the white lie that people think, you shouldn't be killed, because that was how that sin gets paid. Yeah. However, in God's grace, Jesus took your place, right? And now you understand that it makes that change of heart to not try to sin again. Now that doesn't mean you're going to succeed. There are sins that you keep doing, but eventually now you become aware and you no longer do it because you realize that that's the separation between you and God, right? And that's the grace, and that's the whole salvation story in Christianity for us, right? And this is the same thing. People don't like to behold the truth, because like I tell, when I understood I was a sinner and I understood that I had my debt to pay was death. Yeah. And Jesus took that. I realized, oh my God, that's when the change of heart happened. And that's for all of us. But it was hard for me to understand I was a sinner. Yeah. I cheated. I was an adulterer. All these things in my face with compassion. Yeah. Because when Jesus find me in my well, because I always like, my favorite Bible story is the women on the well. Okay. Because oh my God, it's just like, she's me. When I met Jesus, I was in my well.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I remember, and I'm gonna get cried this, because I still remember. I mean,
I
I
thought a
became
lot
a
of things, but I didn't
Christian.
bring tissues in here. I'm sorry.
Yeah, 33 years. I was 33, so that's been 20, almost 20
Yeah.
years that I've been a Christian. And I remember when I was in my ugliest, right, like my sin, God saw me with all His glory and His love for me, and I can see His love through His eyes for
Yeah.
me. And He says, "I love you, Rosie, just where you are."
Oh, wow.
And He did call out that I was, I had so many husbands, and the one I was with was not my husband, but that He was the Savior, and He
Yeah.
had an appointment with me because I was gonna change and save my village.
Yeah.
Because that's what she
That's what
did,
she did.
and that's what I did in mine. And if people get to know Jesus because they know me, my mission in this life is done.
Yeah.
And if He takes me home tomorrow, I'm done. I'm
Yeah.
completely satisfied and happy because He used me to touch others.
Yeah.
So that's one thing when I walk out my house every morning. I say, Lord, just fill me with your presence. So when I go, people know that I'm coming in for your business, in my
Yeah.
Father's business. And it's funny because people says, Rosie's a Christian. I have never told people I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
But
They
my
just know.
actions let that. People are tired of the talk. People want to see, walk the walk. And I walk that walk, and it's not perfect, but I do it. And that's what keeps me going in the morning, and that's it. I mean, now we got all these things that, but
You got me fighting the urge. You know, I'm a pastor, right? Like I love teaching from the scripture and all that. And you got me fighting the urge to start like opening up, talking about you're talking about John chapter 4 is where the story is. And I'm like, man, the best that I can do so many times to preach or teach that, you just did so much more by just showing it yourself. You allowed the word of God, the scriptures, to just lay you wide open and say, this is who I am. This has been my struggle. And so many times what I come up against in pastoral ministry is people don't want to hear you talk about sin, whether it's their own sins or whether it's sin in general. Really, it's more like sin in general, because people say, how dare you judge me, or how dare you judge that person? And it's like, well, first of all, I'm not. I love that person. I wouldn't care about it if I didn't love them. But I also know what sin does. And I know that more than a broken rule, it was a broken relationship. And what Jesus was talking about when he did talk about her sins, it was more to do with, you have broken relationships. And the biggest broken relationship you have is a broken relationship with God. And she wanted to argue about, well, you Jews say you worship in Jerusalem at the temple, and we've been worshiping on Mount Gerizim at our temple that we built there, and we think that that's good enough, and why should we do it how you say? And he's like, listen, true worshipers of God worship in spirit and truth. It's not, your idea of sin and relationships and worship has been misguided all along, and all Jesus cared about was connecting her to the source of life. And by the providence of God, she was face to face with him. She says, I know the Messiah is coming and he'll show us all the right ways. And he's like, good news. Today, I'm right here. I am that guy. And she's like, oh, that's why. Like, that's why it all clicked together. And so, like you said, I'm gonna change my whole village. I'm gonna share this with everyone. And if we each one can understand where we live, so many times people say, well, I don't like this or this about it, or maybe if I move over here, it'll change or it'll be better. What has God called you to do and to fix and to change right where you're at? And, I've met a lot of people, I'll say like you, and here's what I mean by that. In Zephyr Hills, I've met several folks that I say, you're too big for this town. Like, you're too good for this. And let me explain what I mean by that. Like you have so many gifts and talents, and there's such a small, although we're the largest town and city in the county now apparently, but like there's, you could touch so many more people, right? And I think I have this idea in a human nature, like you should be somewhere else where you have a bigger platform, a bigger audience. And it's like, what if that's exactly where God wants you to be, because you can actually change the entire place? I mean, you might have stayed in Tampa somewhere down there and still only be able to touch so many lives. But here you can work with other people, and you might find, 10, 15, 20 years later that we've actually worked together to change an
Mm-hmm.
entire community, which
Yeah.
is what God started putting in my heart to do. Because I would say, God, why am I here? Not
Mm-hmm.
like why am I still here, but like specifically, why did you call me to this
Right.
town? Because I moved from 700 miles away,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, why?
Mm-hmm.
I'll confess, I don't even like hot weather and palm
Right.
trees. I don't care, they're nice, but like it's just like the scenery. I like hills. I like curvy roads.
Mm-hmm.
It's like none of that's here.
Right.
And I don't care about beaches and ocean either. That's not my
Right.
cup of tea. I'm like better in the mountains. I like snow,
Right.
and yet God put me here. And I'm like, why? And he says, and I don't know why me. I
Mm-hmm.
have no idea why. But he's like, I want some people that'll change this community, because the people that live here, like that woman at the well, they're not living how they're supposed to live. They're
Right.
not living how God designed human
Mm-hmm.
beings to live. And you can go anywhere in any town in any country and see that. But for whatever reason, he put me here in this place in this moment, and we're working to see our community changed. And so
Yes.
that's why I'm glad to know people like you that are saying, you know what? It doesn't matter whether I'm there on a big, national platform or right here. And the beautiful thing with this microphone and these cameras is we do have a national
Yes.
platform,
Yes. We
but we
do.
can spend our time working right here and working to change the lives and hearts of people right where we live.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you go to the sidewalk outside of my house here and just sit down in a lawn chair,
Uh-huh.
you'll see it. Every few minutes you'll see, people going past, and you're like, God has so much more for you than
Mm-hmm.
how you're living right
Mm-hmm.
now. And that's not judging them. It's just looking at their
Right.
situation and saying, this is not what it means to be a human.
Yeah.
It's not that struggle is not how God created you to live.
Yeah. Yeah. But thank you so much, because that it is true. If you and we can have see, I never really understood where that chapter is on the Bible, because to me I have kind of personalized, which is not religion, it's relationship
Yeah.
when you come to know Jesus. Because everything, if you really realize what that woman in the well there did and happened 2,000 years ago, is happening to me today,
Mm,
right?
that's great.
Why was she in the middle of the day?
Uh-huh.
Okay, if you go back to the history and stuff, you understand she was hiding from something. She had
You're
no
really trying to get
friends.
me to preach about this passage, right? Like,
Oh my! But then what happened when she understood that was Jesus? She was a messenger back to her
mm-hmm.
community. She was the messenger to say, "Hey, this man say these
Yeah.
things of who I am," and she brought all the village
Yeah.
back, influencers, right?
Right.
Two
Right.
thousand years later, and Jesus
Yeah,
spent
she was
two
an original
days,
social
right?
influencer, right? Yeah.
And Jesus spent 2 days with
Yes.
them after that.
Yeah.
And he had no business being there.
And you know what? There's another time where he went through Samaria, and it said because he was headed to Jerusalem, like to the temple there for the festival, they actually wouldn't keep him. They wouldn't let him stay. Like they actually ran him out of town, and it doesn't say much about that. It's like almost a side comment, and we breeze over that sometimes reading scripture. But when you just said that, it made me think of that. Like you're right. Like there was a time where Jesus went through another Samaritan village, and they're like, "No, not you. Don't
Right.
be here.
Right.
We know where you're headed, and we don't agree with your system or your beliefs. You get out of here." But that woman, she was influenced by him. Her life was changed by him. She went to her community and told them, and they're like, "Please stay with us."
And the community changed. The
Yeah,
community
absolutely.
changed. So that's the part where I tell people, that's how I saw. And I was blessed that eventually God blessed me with this husband who is amazing, who is my biggest supporter, my biggest encourager.
Yeah.
And who I am today is because of his leadership, his love for me, and the priesthood that he is in our home, right?
Yeah.
Because he encouraged me to be who I am, authentic, and she's not afraid of the Hurricane Rosie, and faces me when he has to. But that love, when I saw my husband the first time, the same eyes of how Jesus saw me,
Yeah.
that's how I
Oh,
saw
wow.
my husband. And
Yeah.
that's when I realized, oh my God, this is my husband, the one that God sent me. Because when my husband looked at me the first time, and of course we had looks before, but when it was kind of the love thing,
Yeah.
my husband's view of me will penetrate kind of like my soul. And I was so vulnerable. People are talking about intimacy, and that was,
Yeah.
because it was scary. This guy was seeing my soul
Yeah.
and still love me through the whole
And there's
thing.
people that have been married for years and decades that never actually get to that point.
Yes.
So that's amazing, you know,
Yeah.
that you kind of got that early on.
Hmm. And I'm not saying that, like I said, my husband, when my husband gets to heaven, he's going to be in this line and he's like, you, Rosie's husband, come out to the front.
You're
You
a
don't
saint,
have
man.
to,
You
you
put
don't
up
have
a
to
lot.
stay in line. And you go through that big door over there, go just straight to Jesus, because I'm telling you, my husband took this
Great is your
mess.
reward, sir.
Yeah, and make this wonderful individual, but because of him. And that was the God ordained and God covenant
Yeah.
thing. Because that will be for another day. But I want to close to this today with talk a little bit about my book.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that are doing their business, starting their business or in the middle of their journey as a business owners, because there's tools and tips that they can use immediately to improve their service, their business. So the four components of Ñeque, which is the thing I talk about, is purpose, persistent, persevere, and pivot. Purpose, we've been talking about it for this time, because once you find your purpose, then you'll find your grit and your resilience, which is the persistent. Because to be a business owner and successful, you have to do it every single day.
Yeah.
Your win happens the moment that you get up the next day and do it all over again, right? Then you persevere. That's the third component. And then pivot, which now became such a big word, but I wrote my book before the pandemic, so pivot was not a very familiar word. Now it is pivoting into doing, once you achieve what you have called been called to achieve, you pivot into helping somebody else, or pivot into be a different product on your business and things like that, but always to give back to the community.
Yeah.
Because if you, like you said, God sent us in this time at this place in this location for a reason. And I'm not saying that I might stay in Zephyr Hills, I might not stay in Zephyr Hills, but just because this is temporary here, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to give 110% Rosie to Zephyr Hills.
Yeah.
And if I can serve in any capacity, I will, because that's what my time here is.
Sure.
And I want to encourage you listeners, Nick and you, and thank you for this time, that once you find your purpose, clarity gives you power. And that's what you have with your purpose, clarity. And that's one of those things that if they want to, they can actually go to my website, www.rosiepaulsen.com, www.rosiepaulsen.com, ROSIEPAULSEN.
I'll put that in the show notes as well, and the links to all this stuff so they can find you. You've got a great website too. It's really like, I don't know who built your website, but they did a good job.
Oh, that's My Clone Solutions, and her name is Brooke Burup, and she's actually my project manager, and she's been helping me a lot, because I grew so fast now that I no longer can do the things that I can do by myself, so I had to hire somebody and delegate that, and she's amazing. But yes, so find my book, Ñeque.
I really appreciate you sitting down with me. You know, this has been fun, and you know, there's a whole lot we haven't gotten into that I think is interesting about you and your life. And maybe we can do this again sometime. You know, sit down and talk about, you know, just what brought you to you know, to migrate to the United States and to be here and all that. Look forward to hearing that again. But thanks for sharing with us about your life, your perspective, your journey, and for you know, telling us a little bit about your book as well, because I mean, I know that that's a way that you can kind of express some of the things that you want to say that you can't fit into any one podcast or a few episodes or anything. And so I'd encourage people to go ahead and get a copy of that. The links to that will be in the show notes, so click on the description, the links will be there, and you guys can click on that. So Rosie, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. And if you'd like to be a guest on this podcast, I'll talk about anything. And so I'll put the link in that as well. If you'd like to maybe see about scheduling yourself in for a guest on this, come on and be part of it. So thanks for tuning in and checking it out. Rosie, listeners, we'll catch you again soon. Thanks.
Bye. Ciao.